This week, we welcome Fleming Shi, Chief Technology Officer from Barracuda, to discuss the results of their 2021 ransomware research. In the Leadership and Communications section, 7 tips for better CISO-CFO relationships, 5 simple tips to help you write a powerful email that gets read, 3 strategies to secure your digital supply chain, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. Extra Hop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at securityweekly.com/extra hop. We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 228, recorded August 16th, 2021. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado, but notice I have all the Texas Tech gear on. Yes, the youngest has been officially checked into college. Joining me remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey there. It's that time of year again. It's NFL preseason, Matt. We can start talking football.
I know, and I can go down and watch some Texas Tech games if I find any good colleges coming in. Yeah,
congratulations! Yeah, congratulations!
Yeah, big step this weekend. Mama did okay, so we're good. We're good. My second co-host for today is Mr. Adrian Sanabria. Welcome, Adrian.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, for me, it's for the sport I watch. It's the summer break in the F1 season. And I've been catching up on the W Series. It's a female-only F1 prep series. It's interesting seeing what they're doing with it. It's just his second year.
Yeah, you just gave my daughter a hint on something that was probably not a good idea.
There aren't a ton of Americans in F1, and I think there are 2 in the W Series.
Interesting. All right, Renee, there you go. Cyber Risk Alliance, in partnership with InfraGard, has launched the Critical Infrastructure Resilience Benchmark Study. Measure your readiness for ransomware by completing the survey and getting your score. Visit securityweekly.com/CIRB to take the survey. SC Media debuts its all-new SC Digital Experience, fully integrated with Security Weekly podcast content and more. The new site increases the scope and scale of original content resources from editorial staff, contributors, and far-reaching Cyber Risk Alliance network. Visit scmagazine.com to check out the new look. This segment is sponsored by Barracuda. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Fleming Shi joined Barracuda in 2004 as founding engineer for the company's web security product offering, helping to create the first version of Barracuda's message archiving product and paving the way for expansion into new content security product areas. As Chief Technology Officer, Fleming leads the company's threat research and innovation engineering teams in building future technology platforms to deliver continued success in security and data protection products. He has more than 20 patents granted or pending in network and content security. Fleming, welcome back to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be back here. But, of course, it's a tough topic for everyone. Speaking of the preseasons, though, I was at the Niners game yesterday. So I saw Trey Lance throw his first touchdown in NFL. So that's pretty awesome.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I follow. I'm a big college and pro football person. I love the sport, so I love to follow these kids when they come out of college and see what they do in the NFL. So that's awesome. So we're going to talk ransomware today, and you guys have done some research on some of the latest trends around ransomware. I think I want to start with, we know the numbers are going up, but why? Fleming, why do we see so much ransomware?
Actually, I think it's definitely have been around. I don't think it's any news that people are seeing more attacks and probably more harmful attacks. I think that the key here that we believe that, obviously the ransom asks, the payment asks are going way up, and also the amount of attacks are just constant, right? It's like a whole tsunami of them. But if you zoom back to the days, early days of CryptoLocker, things started with, I will call it virtual cash, and then it turned into a cryptocurrency, right? So I think the attacks are becoming more serious, and probably due to cryptocurrencies being more accepted, more popular, and obviously because of that, you get the attackers thinking cryptocurrency is harder to trace, so they can actually, take action and try to gain as much as they can from it. Of course, throughout the last 3 years, we've been doing research on this area. I think started in 2019, we were focused on municipalities. Municipalities and government agencies were not very well prepared for, a data breach or ransomware attacks. You hear news about them all the time back in, even 3 years ago. Some cities got multiple attacks, right? Now, I think the things have gotten a lot worse. I think that another major reason is that we're really in the post-breach era, where basically a lot of our data have been lost. So, social engineering is much easier. There are stolen credentials out there people can buy. And from those, they can actually get into critical infrastructure, let it be network or applications. From there, they can get to the most important asset, which is data. So I think because of multiple factors, including it's more lucrative with cryptocurrency, they obviously think it's untraceable, but it is actually. But still, it's harder to stop this type of momentum from coming from them. But at the moment, we see a large increase, and we believe this trend is not stopping. So everyone needs to be prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, and crypto has played a part of this, and there's a lot of things on the financial side, and I follow the meme stocks too, and crypto plays a little bit into that. So that's a sidebar. But I think it's the preparedness, it's the readiness. The InfraGard survey that we're doing with their members is partially on this topic, because how prepared are these different industry sectors to be prepared and ready for ransomware? And we're starting to get the results in, and I think it's a little eye-opening, is there's not a lot of readiness and preparedness. And we'll talk about that towards the end, some things to focus on. But as I go through the research, I look at the breakdowns, right, of where we're seeing ransomware attacks, and healthcare is high on the list, critical infrastructure is high on the list, travel, municipalities, which doesn't surprise me because that's your state and local governments. Are those numbers higher than they have been in the past? Are we seeing the shift away from traditional financial services to these other sectors because they're not prepared for ransomware?
I do see a large increase against corporations, organizations, and it doesn't have to be financial at all. Partially because people are really buying cyber insurance, right? So there are a lot of folks who believe they're protected with the insurance, but in fact, they're just opening up as major targets if you're actually leaking the information by insurance. So in many months ago, I talked about not paying the ransom if you can. Also, prevent leaking of your cyber insurance information to the outside. All these are considered secrets for any organization. So, but really looking at the situation now is anyone has digital asset or creating digital asset or even hosting customer data will become a major target, right? So in many ways, I think we're all targeted, but obviously some of the big ones you heard, it doesn't even have to be in US. It's all across the world. This is happening. We have seen companies in Asia, in Europe, under attack, and the ransom ask is just as high as over here, right?
Yeah, I mean, from an organization perspective, we're in this strange conundrum, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we have to, we're obligated in some instances to have cyber liability insurance. I know as a managed service provider and IT services company, as part of vendor risk assessment, we're asked, do you have cyber liability that covers you up to 10 million, right? So in many instances, to do business, we're required to have that cyber liability insurance. Ultimately, if something were to happen, in an incident response scenario, a fiduciary, an attorney gets assigned to any type of security incident. And then from there, if it's a ransomware incident, you get a ransomware negotiator. So, for the malactors, it's almost like guaranteed money. Well, let's ask for 10 million and we'll probably get 5, and ultimately we're kind of chasing our tails there. And in some instances we say, don't pay the ransom if you don't have to, if you can, if you're not in a position to pay them, don't. But, I've had conversations with CFOs of Fortune 500 companies, and they basically say, listen, it's an exercise in risk mitigation. If I'm going to lose more in those few days that I'm down or weeks that I'm down than I will by paying the ransom, I'm paying it because I want my business up and running. So, it's kind of that conundrum that we're in as businesses is, ultimately you have a CFO and a CEO saying, I need my business back up and running, so I'm just going to pay the ransom. And for us as cyber experts, we're saying you're enabling the problem, but business needs to operate. So where's that happy medium, right? It's ultimately, I think we need to do better as far as shoring up our ability to be resilient against ransomware attacks.
Exactly. And I think it's being prepared, rather pay the good guys to be prepared versus where you get into a situation where you're paying both. And then sometimes it's not going to be just one payment. It's extortion after extortion, right?
Yeah.
So when the data feeds, if you lose data, most likely the data will become weaponized again, and it can reappear, and it can actually be used against other organizations that you're connected to. So I think it's a cyclical problem, and really getting in front of it, be prepared, and be aware what to do is really important. And now the good news is that we also see negotiations are coming to fruition a lot of times, and you actually get some of the money back if the authorities are involved. So I think there's all signs that's potentially we can get some handle or even some I think resistance against this type of kind of just open season kind of attacks. But it will take time. Yeah, it takes the whole industry to be ready to drive, sort of the change of the tide.
Yeah. And Fleming, that's a good point, because I've actually seen that in action where, we've had a client be a victim of a ransomware attack. The incident response team comes in, does their thing, and makes all the recommendations for remediation. And then they get hit again. I think it was like 10 months later, they got hit again. And it was a situation where now the cyber liability insurance would not cover part of it because they made remediation recommendations that, they didn't necessarily implement correctly. So now it's a conversation in, are you going to get reimbursed for that?
Yeah. And I think that's the exciting part for service providers. The reason I bring that up is, look, when I joined Barracuda 2004 timeframe, things were quite simple, right? I wouldn't call it simple, but you have people working together, conjugating in a building, maybe a few branch offices. You can have a relatively sophisticated system to actually protect you, right? But now cybersecurity is actually getting a lot more complex, and the attackers are more sophisticated. And we're in the post-breach era, so it doesn't have to take multiple phishing, or social engineering steps to get to your maybe legacy credentials, or even potentially credentials that's active, to eventually launch an attack against your public-facing infrastructure, right? So in our report, we are trying to raise the awareness of application infrastructure protection, as well as network security infrastructure needs to be really up to the level where you have zero trust on all the edges that you actually operating. And from that perspective, really reducing the attack surface. Even you have being inside of the post-breach era, with most likely a lot of data could be on sale in the dark web, right? So speaking about all that, it's really going beyond just clicking on a file, you're seeing an email, or clicking on a link. Those could be actually used for spear phishing or phishing to attempt to get your credentials, but more than likely, those credentials are already in the criminal's hands. They're attacking your infrastructure while you're not looking, right? So having service provider like you guys to be able to monitor and watch over all the different attack surfaces using technology like XDR behind a service that actually help the customer who are less prepared today and the attacks are more sophisticated is one of the key things we want to drive. So definitely important to pay attention to. Yeah.
Fleming, I also noticed we talked a little bit about this with the ransomware payments. Cryptocurrencies fueling higher ransoms. I think cyber insurance is fueling higher ransom. We're seeing double and triple encrypted, where you pay a ransom and then you got to pay another ransom. Are these like the main trends and why we're seeing the higher demands around the payments for ransomware? Is these different factors around cyber insurance, crypto, and like multi-stage ransomware attacks?
Yeah, actually, that brings up a good point, because through our study this year, we actually see a little bit of a bright spot where people are refusing to pay. So I also believe the bad guys are not getting all the payments they wanted, the smaller payments maybe a few years ago. You guys remember, CryptoLocker started with $150, right? Right now, we're talking millions, right? So I think partially because they're trying to have more effective attacks, and obviously taking data to hostage, eventually taking breach of data or leaking your data, your privacy posture into hostage. So I think they have multiple ways to monetize what they get. So I think that's another area where you see it's becoming more serious, and the asks are much higher because they can hold the data that you care about a lot. And of course, your reputation could be ruined if you're not able to keep the privacy for your customers and your partners, right? So I think those are all reasonable, I would say, basically reasonable business opportunities for the criminals to actually try to monetize on at the highest as they can, right?
Yeah. And then obviously negotiations and hope you get the payment down. Now, I want to talk about preparedness for this. And I love this because you tie into my three core themes. I've always said there's only three types of controls that matter: application controls, user and identity controls, and data controls. And here in this report, you actually laid them out in a slightly different order, but you hit the same point. So talk to us. How do I help prevent these attacks? Because the assumption has to be by now, everybody is susceptible. So what do I do to prepare and hopefully mitigate and prevent some of these attacks?
Yeah, so I think we call it to really simplify a little bit, because if you look at MITRE ATT&CK framework, it talks about 14 phases, and attacks can come in from any part of the phase. It doesn't have to always start from reconnaissance and get their ball rolling, because a lot of the things that they need may already in their possession, right? So just phishing alone, for example, it appears, I think, in 5 out of the 14 phases where basically the attackers can find a way to get to you through email or any other way of messaging or communication to cause you to either leak credentials or leak critical information. So to that degree, I think the most important thing is make sure you protect your credentials. Of course, I mentioned there are already lists out there people can buy, especially with probably ill-prepared victims where they did a poor job of offboarding. Maybe legacy credentials can be utilized in those cases unnoticed, right? So that's one thing, credentials, to make sure you protect them. The next thing is really about application infrastructure and network infrastructure. So a lot of times, for example, what we saw in the Colonial situation, part of it's people accessing through VPN with the legacy credential. From there, then they can expand and really set camp to actually get to the data they want. So in order to protect that, you really need to make sure your application is protected by something like a web application firewall, or basically OWASP top 10 should be covered on those conditions, because let it be a SQL injection, or sometimes it's content injection, and even to like broken authentication schemes that's in your application, or any vulnerability in your application software infrastructure could lead to basic catastrophic access to your data, right? Then, of course, behind it, the third thing that's really important is to make sure you have a very advanced data protection scheme in place, so you can do your DR correctly, right? So not leaving the data, in one place. Make sure they're encrypted in the cloud in multiple places, and make sure that when the bad guys gets it, you have a signal. Even they try to tamper with your data protection, like your backup, you can get the right signals to make sure nothing can come out of it. Because if you are not seeing the tampering, it could actually lead to, even you have a backup, it won't be useful, right? So these are the 3 major parts, but there are many other things we can talk about. For example, zero trust, as I mentioned earlier, preventing accessing your entire network through VPN or a segment of your network. Only allowing SaaS access when you have proper security posture in play. So I think people should invest in zero trust access, not only for networks, but also for SaaS applications, because a lot of data are stored and created inside the SaaS applications.
Yeah, I want to double click into some of these, because I think credentials are the first thing, right? Lots of credentials out on the dark web. And multi-factor authentication is one fail-safe mechanism for credential reuse, right? Granted, we have to prevent credentials from being stolen, but if they do get stolen and I have basic multi-factor authentication in place, I render those dark web reuse credentials pretty much useless at that point. I mean, that's a pretty simple technique, isn't it?
As long as you train the humans, Matt, because I have prime examples of people getting prompted for MFA through, let's say, a manufacturer app, and it's, approve or deny. And because they're running 1,000 miles an hour, they still hit approve. And they don't realize that it's a pen test, right? And we're testing MFA, and we're testing their knowledge and cyber awareness. So as long as the human factor doesn't come into play and they're educated.
Yeah. And the other thing, to that degree, it's also all the processes that you have in place. You have to be really clear and transparent and really well tested. One thing I do want to mention is there are a lot of legacy infrastructure components that do not necessarily implement MFA, but may still be deployed and in use. Those are immediately should be looked at right away and get replaced if possible. But MFA can cover a lot, but again, there are still situations that you have to pay attention. For example, I think you guys know the Google Voice hack, right? right? So they can actually try to social engineer you to get your code from Google Voice when you're enabled, then you lose access to your phone number, right? So things like that is really something to pay attention to. It's not uncrackable. There's a lot of things the bad guys can do. Yeah.
And so Fleming did say security awareness in there, Jason, by the way. So we covered that aspect.
Yes, for sure. The awareness is really important. But remember, awareness are right now the way they do training. A lot of times you build fake campaigns, right? Things that you hope these are the weapons the bad guys will use to drive awareness. It's definitely helpful, but at some point we have to figure out how to really deactivate the weapon and utilize the bad guys' weapons to train our people at some point. I think it's really good if we can do that.
Yeah, so Fleming, earlier you mentioned XDR, and I'd be interested to get your take on this. But do you think it's possible to detect it early enough and have humans stop these attacks? I know that's part of the, at least the goal. I think when a lot of people acquire XDR and detective technology like this, or do you feel like we have to get to the point where we can automate responses, to be able to operate fast enough to stop some of these attacks after they get in?
Yeah, definitely. So what I like about XDR is especially the open XDR vendors. And the open XDR vendors are much more, focused on getting the signals from any vendor. And they don't have to be a cybersecurity vendor. They just provide XDR platform. The reason for that is because not everybody bought everything Barracuda or everything, let's say Sophos, right? So you end up with these gaps if you have a mixture of tools. So XDR is really capable if you're able to integrate not only on data ingestion, but also in extraction of useful data, and also be able to take action with APIs. You can do so with enough speed, so you can actually stop the attack. But there's so many tactics in MITRE's coverage. You probably have seen. There's so many angles, so many techniques. Every one of those techniques have to be somehow mapped into a good XDR platform to actually get that signal, right? So first of all, mixture of vendors. If you're it will be really crazy if you think, I'm just going to go online and go buy a XDR platform and run it myself. Actually, that's very hard, right? Imagine if you're buying a product, the company probably had a SIM product in the past, and now they have a XDR product. Just getting that product is not enough, because you need to have trained eyes. You need to know how to integrate with all the tools you have. And this is why I believe the right thing for smaller and medium-sized businesses of all different organization types should consider MSP or MSSP as an option to make sure you get the right outcome from XDR.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of new managed XDR services. Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. I was just going to say that speaks to the ecosystem conversation we have a lot, right? Is create a scenario where you have those integrations and communications between all of your tools, so that way you can gather the right context, so you can respond immediately, whether it's through the humans or through automations and orchestration, right? But at the end of the day, it's important to build that context across the entire infrastructure and entire environment. So, kudos to the folks who are kind of opening up and partnering with, in some instances they could be competitors, because that just shows me as a leader that you're thinking about positive outcomes instead of revenue all the time, right? Which is a beautiful thing. Because we need more of these siloed applications and tools talking and working with each other in order for us to be successful.
Exactly. So one of the things we did, I really like this company called Stellar Cyber. What they have done is a true open XDR platform. So Barracuda have successfully integrated 3 of our products with them in terms of not just data ingestion, but also taking action, right? And they can basically pre-program the platform to automatically take action if people are not watching. So you can do, for example, you can stop an IP from attempting to get into your infrastructure for a certain amount of hours or a certain amount of time until humans come in and assess the real issue, right? So we also recently acquired a company called Scout, which makes XDR consumable through MSSPs that Barracuda's have partner with. So that makes it much easier. Imagine if you're a dental shop or a legal office, and the real thing you want to do is call your MSP or MSSP to really get your hands on something like that. So you don't have to hire experts and run the product or assume you're running it correctly. You really get the professional help in that way.
One of the things this conversation brings up is I don't want to forget about APIs. You talked about securing SaaS applications, but now we're talking about API integration. And part of your findings also said, look, we have to protect the APIs, especially when we're dealing with these types of integrations. We want our API communications secured, not only to our XDR platform, but potentially any of our other applications that are out there. And that's a big piece sometimes I think people miss, those APIs and securing those APIs.
Absolutely. So, OWASP added API components to the to basically make sure people are paying attention to that, because APIs work only because they have tokens, they have authentication between them, they have ability to interact. And I think, if you lose, control or lose, visibility of how your application work beyond, your own setup, obviously you're interacting through APIs, you basically have a huge blind spot, right? So I think that's something that you definitely have to pay attention to. The other part is we have heard enough about supply chain attacks too, software supply chain, right? So those are also very critical to make sure you have a grasp on how your vendors are doing and what are their posture, whether they have exposed certain things that's vulnerable, right? So these are all the things that we have to really come together as an industry to figure out together. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Together. Fleming, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure always. And hopefully you can say no to ransom payments at some point. Be prepared. And it may take a few times, but get to that point and be prepared is really, really important for how we defend everyone, especially in the post-breach era.
Yes, and to learn more about how to prepare and prevent ransomware attacks, please visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.
Cybercriminals are using social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on victims, your employees, or your customers. Protect your Office 365 email from today's most sophisticated attacks with Barracuda Email Threat Scanner. It's a free tool to help protect your business from these hard-to-detect attacks. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner uses artificial intelligence to hunt and eliminate Office 365 email threats. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email right now. Get your free email threat scan at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/CyberSync.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Adrian Sanabria. Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person this December 5th through 7th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. We're excited to announce our first round of speakers: Leslie Carhart, David Kennedy, Alyssa Miller, O'Shea Bowens, Marina Ciavata, Patrick Coble, Chris Eng, Eric Escobar, Nick Leghorn, Michael Schlatt, Kevin Johnson, and Justin Kohler. Visit securityweekly.com/unlock to register and check out our rockstar lineup. Join us August 26th at 11 a.m. Eastern to learn how to implement cloud security that actually works. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register now. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, on to the leadership and communications articles for the week. So, Jason, I started with this first one. I love the title, Real IT Leadership, Selling the Transformative Dream. And then I read the article and I was like, yeah, there wasn't much guidance here on, like, what should I do to sell that
How
dream?
to sell. There was no guidance on how to sell. You know, in concept, like you said, the title is great because as leaders in an organization, I mean, that part of the job is to be a salesman, but I don't mean it in a creepy way, like a car salesman way. I mean in an influential way, right? It's to be able to get folks within the business to align with your mission and your strategy. So there is a level of selling the mission, selling the vision, and getting people on board and building the trust. Because, you know, I say it all the time, just trust is that foundation of relationships and influence and your ability to change hearts and minds toward the direction that you need to be taking your team and your business to. So there is an aspect of selling. And I know folks who've grown up in the engineering world and they're adamant, I'll never be a salesperson, I'll never be a salesman. But once you get into leadership, it's about having meaningful conversations. And sometimes it is, quote unquote, selling the dream, selling the vision.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to take directives from the top and kind of weave them through the organization and build consensus.
Yeah.
And that's what a leader does, right? Whether you're a CIO
Absolutely.
or a CISO or whatever. I mean, that's part of the business. And I think, you know, our interview with Jim Ralph last week around some of the areas he discussed. I mean, true business leadership, right? Don't be the SME, you know, build consensus. And I thought this article was going to go down the same path. It didn't quite go there for me, but I think it is an important topic is as executives, even in a very technical field, whether it's IT or security, we do have to build consensus and be leaders. And that means a little bit of sales, a lot of business acumen. I mean, it all plays into kind of the skill sets these executives need.
Yeah, and if you look at the article, there's actually a paragraph in there that links to a separate article called The 7 Skills of Successful Digital Leaders. That one kind of gets into a little bit, you know, it gets a little bit deeper, you know, being capable of navigating uncertainty and having conversations around that, being adept at building relationships. So that article actually gets a little bit deeper. So check out that link off of the original. But at the end of the day, you know, a lot of what we discuss on this show about building the relationships, building the trust, having open communication with business units, learning the business, right? Learning their business so you can actually articulate, what you're trying to achieve through their terminology and in the business's terminology is going to get you a long way.
Yeah, that ties into this. Oh, go ahead, Adrian.
I also clicked into that second article and totally agree with that. Especially like the empathy piece. I've often, like when I train salespeople, like one of the core principles there is, let people talk a bit. Ask them about what they're frustrated with, what they're having trouble with, and just listen. They first and foremost, they need therapy. They need somebody to just sit and listen to their problems. And, I've always found like one of the best ways to get your foot in the door and to get somebody to listen to you and maybe on board as, somebody that can help you is, come fix their printer, from an IT perspective, maybe we can prioritize some of their issues, and get a little, kind of like a loss leader from a traditional standpoint, scratch their back first.
Yep. No, absolutely. Right. And it's amazing. You're dead on, Adrian, about the listening skills, and many times people like to walk in the door and be the smartest person in the room. But ultimately, if you want to build that trust, you want to build that relationship, it's sitting back and listening. It's how you're going to learn. It's how you're going to learn what they're all about as a leader. It's how you're going to learn how to communicate with them and what their motivations are. It's how you're going to learn about their portion of the business so you can align to that. And think of it this way. As a leader, there's lots of stages of leadership. And as you get up toward the top levels, you're looking at it more from that servant leadership perspective, right? You're there to serve. And that's ultimately what it is. And that's kind of how I've always attacked my leadership style is, listen, I'm a service provider. I'm here to serve these business units and provide them an outcome. And the only way to do that is to learn and listen.
Yeah, I take the same tact, but I describe it a little differently. I often say security should be like a consulting group within the organization. A place people are comfortable coming to with questions.
100% agreed.
Yep. Talking about relationships, the second article. I love the second article. 7 tips to improve the CISO CFO relationship. Because think about it, right? If we just want to be considered a cost center, fine. But you're not going to get very far in building momentum and being a true leader, right? And so you have to understand the relationship with the CFO. And I love this because I've spent so much time over the past few years building business plans, understanding profit loss statements. This is a learned skill. This is not something that's natural to most of us in the technology space. And this article, I think, really helps think about, like, what are the things you have to do as a CISO to understand what the CFO is talking about. How do I do a better job of budgeting? How do I measure outcomes when it comes to the financials? This was a great article. I love this because I do this all the time because the way we run the business here at Cyber Risk.
This is probably one of the most important articles we've had on this show in a while for aspiring CISOs, aspiring technology leaders who have a seat at the table, right? Because at the end of the day, that CFO and that finance team is the engine that runs the business. And they have the ear of the CEO. They have the ear of the board of directors. And ultimately, having that relationship and learning the operations of the finance team is only going to benefit you in the long run, because now you can align your business unit, the security team, to what the expectations of the CFO are. And ultimately, they can be a mentor to you as a business leader, right? To really help and guide you through how to present to the CEO, how to present to the board of directors, and what's important to bring to the table. Because in many instances, we hear stories around, CISOs getting up in front of the board of directors and really taking their presentation way too technical and way too in the weeds. And it doesn't come across as value add to them, right? So having that person you can bounce ideas off of to really make sure that as you're communicating and presenting to the other C-level executives or the board, you're doing it in a manner that's going to be impactful. And the CFO has their ear to the ground because they're constantly doing it from a financial perspective.
Yeah, let me give everybody some tips what happens when you run a business or you run a business unit. You want things. How do you justify things, right? What's it going to cost? How much revenue is it going to drive? You have to understand these dynamics because, as Paul and I have continued to grow the Security Weekly side of the business and the business intelligence unit, which I now run, every request has revenue tied to it. It has top line revenue tied to it, right? So you have to understand that balance of what an investment cost looks like and what is the expectation on the revenue side on the other side. Security is the exact same way. I want a new widget to improve this, that, or the other thing. That cost, where is that going to either reduce cost somewhere else or how is that going to enable me to drive more revenue? That's what the CFO wants to know. And if you don't understand those dynamics, you're never going to be able to position these projects in a positive way.
That's it. And to be honest with you, conversations with CFOs have led me to understand there's different types of revenue too. There's direct and indirect revenue. You know what I mean? And you're starting to look at things like pull through. You can enable certain opportunities by putting in certain technologies, but then there's the unintended consequences of additional revenue, that indirect revenue that comes from that and pull through, right? So now you're really strategizing from a financial perspective all the different types of revenue sources that could be coming in that your department is helping enable.
Yeah, then you got renewing revenue, recurring renewal revenue versus brand new, revenue. Those are two different types of revenue buckets.
Right. And let me tell you, you want to motivate a CFO, you start talking to them about ARR, annual reoccurring revenue. That's going to make a twinkle in their eye.
I was going to say, it's important for the people under the CISO as well. I can't tell you how many times, I've heard CISOs, talk about, training budget, at the beginning of the year, very positively, like everybody's going to get to go to training, blah, blah, blah. And it's the first thing that gets cut, and man, that's a killer for morale because a lot of people that's one of the biggest highlights in their whole year, like they'll change jobs just to go to a place that'll actually send them off to training because, they want to further their career. They want to learn new skills. They want to get certifications and stuff like that. And if you're not managing that budget right, if you're not protecting that training budget, you're going to have retention problems.
Yeah.
Like Jim said I was going to say, Jim said it last week, right? There's no unlimited budget for training. Right?
Right. Yeah.
You put together your plan to play, we'll fund it.
Yep. Yeah.
And he didn't like the word retention. I'm trying to remember what he said.
Development.
Yeah. Development. Yeah. You don't retain employees. And it does sound kind of terrible. Like every time I say that now, I'm going to correct myself.
Yeah. And honestly, if you have a really good relationship with the CFO, you can figure out very innovative ways to make sure you're aligning training to the employees, right? I mean, there's been instances in tight years, you have conversations with the CFO and they have visibility into so many other aspects of the business that they can really get innovative with you and leverage partnership trainings and, economies of scale with other trainings and other departments that are happening, so it really allows, having that good relationship allows you to think outside the box when it comes to funding things.
Yes. This next article, three strategies for securing the digital supply chain. I was actually a little surprised by the recommendations in this one. It almost looked like it was a sponsored post.
Yeah.
But it's not because it's very heavy on patch management and automation. And I would have thought for sure this was sponsored, but that's where it led you down a patching process.
Yeah, no, I agreed. I mean, I'm very surprised that it's not sponsored, and I'm wondering if indirectly it is in some way, shape, or form.
I'm not sure the people that were using that accounting package, that Ukrainian accounting package, would agree with the just automatically run the updates. Yeah,
I mean,
because that's how you got it.
Right. If you applied the patches, you got, yeah. And so, they're talking about automated tools to fix simple vulnerabilities and do a cost benefit analysis for vulnerability patching. And, I just would have thought that having read all this, that there would have been like a sponsor, like somebody just would have popped out of the woodwork is sponsoring this, because it just seems so technology focused.
Yeah. Which is odd for, HBR, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is, right? And so when I think about the steps I need to do around digital supply chain and securing it, I need a proper inventory. I need to do a risk assessment. I need to look at the various controls that are in place and how do I want to apply those. This went straight to vulnerability management and patching, which is like 2 or 3 layers below the 3 things I just talked about.
Yeah. I mean, when I first read the headline, I was thinking vendor risk management, supply chain auditing, you know what I mean? More of the GRC side of the aisle, making sure you're vetting your partners in your supply chain and really, testing them to whatever compliance or regulatory needs you need as a business, and really managing your supply chain at the highest levels. But this was very, very laser focused. And it's one piece of a very massive puzzle.
It is. I mean, vuln management and patching is just one piece of a much bigger set of controls that need to be done. So anyways,
right.
Next. 5 simple tips to write an email that will actually be read. Again, we send a lot of emails. I thought this was interesting in thinking about how you structure your emails. How do you get more engagement from your emails? I think a lot of people are emailed out, to be honest. I mean, the first thing I do every morning is I clear out all the junk. And so if it says bulk in it, it's almost immediately gone. Yeah. But, think about your subject line, the format. What do you want to get across in that first sentence that attracts the attention of the reader to get engagement? And so this kind of walks through those different steps.
Yeah, I would take the word email out of this and say any type of digital communication, right? Because at the end of the day, some of us are using Teams, some of us are using Slack, right? A lot of organizations are trying to rip themselves out of email because it's become so much of a collection of noise to the point where, you're federating with partners and companies and clients through, the more modern unified communications type systems. And I would say this holds to any type of digital communication. Geez, even if I'm leaving someone a voicemail, I'm going to make sure my opening statement, the subject line, is powerful because they want to pay attention to it, because they're probably going to listen to about 10 seconds of it, right? So at the end of the day, I would use these for any type of communication. But you do. I mean, number one is you have to get someone's attention because, we're running 1,000 miles an hour and we're going to pay attention to what we're prioritizing first, right? So you got to grab that attention right away.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the benefits here is there's a ton of marketing tools out there where you can plug in a whole email or just a subject line or something like that, and it's intended for cold emails to improve click rate, but it works in general. Usually, what you're going to use for that, applies to, email communications inside the company as well. The same kind of like keep it short and sweet. People get it's something that you have to keep in mind every time you send an email. The person I'm sending an email, this is just one of 300 they're going to look at today. So immediately, if you've got 8 paragraphs in there, they'll open it and just say nope. Right.
Yep.
If it's that important, they'll reach out.
and it'll most people have a bucket for when I've got tons of extra time, I'll get to this.
Which in many instances is almost never. So they'll never get to it.
Might as well be deleted, right?
Yeah, exactly it. Yeah, and I like the last one. Your communication should have a call to action. There's nothing worse than having a communication.
Call to action.
Yeah.
Say again?
One call to action.
Yeah, right. But have a call to action, right? Saying, what do you need? What are you expecting out of this? What are the expectations of this communication that I'm sending you?
And that should be number 3. That should be your first sentence, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I often focus on really heavily is that the TLDR, the first sentence should always be the TLDR. Like if they only read that one thing, that should tell you what they're asking for. And those are some of the most frustrating emails I've ever read, are the ones where literally it's flipped and you have to trudge through all this stuff, and then the call to action is at the very bottom, after 4 or 5 paragraphs. And it's if you've ever looked at a heat map of how somebody reads a web page or an email, it's F-shaped. They'll read the entire first line, maybe if you're lucky, the entire first 2 lines, and then they read the next couple lines, maybe the first 4 or 5 words, then 1 or 2 words, then 1 word, and then it just falls off. So it's this curve where if you don't get your point across, or if you don't grab them in those first 2 lines, forget it.
Yep.
And the reason we don't go back and ever check that email bucket is because we are now in the endless digital workday. Now, this is an HBR
nice
article
transition.
I actually like.
That was great.
Very nice.
I am a professional. But I like this one because it analyzes what happens when we are remote work. And what I thought was really interesting here is there's some certain trends that stuck, like 9 to 5 is still the main window, but it's only 60% of the window. And we see now activity outside of both of those windows. And the reason I think this is so important is, look, who knows when all of us are ever going to get back into a regular office situation. We're going to be in this. And I think the research they did here and the tips in here are going to help you build a better collaboration with your teams in a remote workforce, because work is being done outside of 9 to 5. You just have to understand how it's being done in and outside of those traditional windows. And I think you get better team engagement.
Yeah, totally. And I think you get better results, right? Because one of the things that stood out for me was more from the process efficiency side of the aisle, right? Where it said 41% of business processes were positively correlated with team overlap, meaning the teams are working at the same time together. How many instances, especially in a leadership position, do I see, one department who's part of a process, but that process involves like 4 or 5 different departments, and because there's a roadblock because one department's not available at that time, the entire process slows down and shuts down. So having that level of visibility to say, at certain times of the day, everybody's working together, and it makes that process flow more efficient. And for me, being a service provider, that's ultimately frictionless to our customers. And that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve, right? Is getting the best service out to the customer. We don't want to say, hey, sorry, we're not going to be able to get this to you tomorrow because the 2 teams weren't online at the same time working together. Right. That's the last thing we want to say. So figuring out that balance of when you have everyone together working so processes flow efficiently, that was impactful for me.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it's that midday, because people take breaks and lunch at different times, and especially when you're in different time zones. That lunch hour gets extended from a time slot to across a couple hour time slot based on different time zones. Right.
And I mean, if you're doing the right amount of analysis, you can have processes that you say, listen, the best time to process whatever this action is going to be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Right? That's when we want to do this because we know we're going to be the most efficient at it.
And there's so many factors here. Somebody who spent a year and a half as the only U.S. employee of a South African-based company, all my coworkers were 7 hours ahead, or 8 hours, depending on the time of year. And but I mean, bunch of factors in here. Like some people are just naturally more productive at different times of the day. So it's kind of dumb to lock them into a schedule where they're not more productive. And then, I always urge people to go check out Jason Fried's, it's about a 16-minute TED Talk called Why Work Doesn't Happen at Work. A lot of times the reason that you're seeing work happen in the evenings is because that's when they can do work. There's meetings during the day. So certain work just can't get done during those meetings. So that's the time available, to do creative work, to get through email, so, and Jason covers all that in that talk. He talks about asking people when they get work done. A lot of people say, really early in the morning or really late at night, or it'll be a place like on the train, on the commute, at the coffee shop or something like that. It's usually a time or a place. And they never answer at work during work hours. Like, you almost never hear that answer. That's not when work, and work being the actual, productivity.
Right. Because, like in my case, I'm back to back 9, 10 meetings in a row. I'm not getting work done. I'm just on meetings, right? Yeah. So guess when I get my stuff done? Early in the morning, later in the afternoon. This is just proving that the way we work and when stuff gets done are going to be at different times.
Yeah, flexibility is important.
Yeah.
And focus on outcomes, not when people are working.
Yep.
Right.
100%.
Yep, agreed. These last 2 articles are around careers. The first one is around cybersecurity professionals need training and a pay raise, which I thought was an interesting end to the research. I mean, this is the research that ISSA and others have done, year over year. And we talked about this last week with Jim around training, right? And it's not about employee retention; it's about employee development, and that means training. That means you build a program, and you if you're responsible as a cybersecurity and you can get it funded, great. Because the research says 91% of those we surveyed agree the cybersecurity professionals need to keep up with their training, or it puts their organization at risk. That's a pretty huge stat. 91% is a big number.
Oh yeah, big time. Especially couple it with 57% who they don't think they're getting enough training, right? So I mean, at the end of the day, we need to be focused on that. And I know in many instances, I know of many engineers and many technical folks who would take a flat compensation and not get a raise if they got more training in their careers. I've had many conversations with folks saying, you know what, I'm ready to leave where I'm at. They're not training me enough. The salary's not where I want it to be, and the 2 of those together are detrimental, right? So in the conversations is if one or the other were there, I don't think I'd be thinking this hard, but when they're coupled together, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Couple that with if you are going to leave, then where do you go? Because I'm not surprised by this top career list. I mean, application development security. We've been talking application security for a long time. We've seen tremendous uptick in AppSec, the development side, the whole concept of shift left and DevSecOps.
Yep.
Hot space, right? So this is going to continue to pick up momentum. Cloud security doesn't surprise me. We see a ton of migration to the cloud. What I thought was interesting, though, and we talk a lot about risk management on this show, but a lot of people don't think about risk management from a security perspective. But this article says, look, number 3 is risk management. Risk managers are in demand, and a lot of us don't think sometimes that that's traditional security.
I don't know. What's my mantra, Matt? What's my mantra? Learn it or you'll report to it. Guaranteed.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think that's one of the number one things that people from the outside don't understand about cybersecurity is it's so broad. Like show people that mind map of CISO's responsibilities. Yep. It's just like I mean, right. I don't know any other. I mean, obviously the CFO covers anywhere where there's money. And that's pretty broad, but pretty shallow, where security folks are expected to go, I think, a bit deeper, across such a broad range of stuff. Yeah, it really is a lot, but yeah, in some people's mind, when you say cybersecurity, they think about very specific technical hackery type stuff. And
right.
It's there. That's part of it. Sure. It's a very visible part of it, but there's a lot more.
Yeah, and ultimately it snaps into an overall business risk management program, right? So risk management is key. And those are the conversations that the CFO, the CEO, and the board of directors are going to be having with you.
And what frustrates me here is where are the internships? Where are the junior folks? Like I've been working with some mentees and I can't find them a job anywhere. I can try and call in favors. Nothing. Like I keep hearing about there being a skills gap, but it seems to be at like the top. Like there's nothing at the bottom. There's nobody training people up.
You know what? Is that an end product of us being a little bit too rigid in the way we're hiring, though? And we talked about it on the show before. You know, we have all these expectations of cybersecurity professionals when we're hiring them. You need to have a master's degree and 10 years, you know, in the business to even get, you know, a level 2 engineering job, right? Come on.
It's not just that.
You got to be better at the way we're hiring.
It's not just that. It's like I literally know, like somebody would have a junior position, you'd ask them about it, and they'd be like, yeah, we took that off the table, you know, because we only have this much money. And, you know, we'd rather get one senior person rather than like a lower level person and a junior person.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it's
they're hiring for unicorns.
Right? Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I mean, it's I think it's short-sighted is one of security's biggest problems. Things move so fast. You know, I mean, if cybersecurity trends were children, we'd be horrified at how quickly they get murdered and killed off.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about threat intelligence in the analyst positions, et cetera, that's where you would expect to see those entry-level jobs, bring them in as SOC 1 analysts, train them up, move them up through their career. But if they're hiring the unicorns and the senior level people, how are we going to get new blood and new talent into this industry?
It's just easy button. Everybody wants the easy button. You know what? Build an apprenticeship program. Start grooming cybersecurity professionals. Right? I mean, come on. We gotta do this kind of stuff.
Reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. I'm trying to remember exactly where it came from, but everybody's got the money to do it. Nobody's got the money to do it right, but everybody's got the money to do it over.
Kind of like CISO hiring. Oh, did I say that wrong? You know what I mean. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Great show as always. Thank you everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.